Two types of people are going to watch this video. On the one hand, there are people who identify as left wing or who think of themselves as left of center and peer with interest at what's going on in the left wing. And on the other hand, there are going to be right wing people, centrist people, anti woke people who watch this with a little bit of interest in understanding what's going on right now in terms of the left wing mentality. And it is hard to understand. Many leftists have sleepwalked their way into the transgender issue with the following very understandable assumption. This is an understandable assumption that happens to be misleading and dangerous and false. They assume the left has always supported gay rights and homosexuality, and therefore this is now just a further flavor of homosexuality. This is just another form of gay rights for the left to unquestionably support. What if we didn't and frame the question in those terms? What if we looked at human civilization in terms of the development and deployment of ever new and more ingenious mind-altering drugs, right? And whether left or right, you have to determine for yourself how sternly and how staunchly you are going to support sobriety in opposition to the majority of people that at any given time in any given culture are uncritically enjoying and celebrating the mind-altering drugs of the day. So you live in a culture that's dominated by alcoholics. That's one thing. You live in a culture that's dominated by pot smokers, marijuana users. That's another thing. You live in a culture, as I do right now, where you're surrounded by methamphetamine addicts, fentanyl addicts, so on and so forth. Okay. Some people, left, right, or center, are really going to take the political risk of opposing the current of mainstream culture, the popular acceptance of and tolerance of these drugs, and say, no, this is something bad and evil and wrong. This is something not fit for a human being. This is something I wouldn't do myself, and I wouldn't want my son or daughter to do. And therefore, all my fellow citizens, I'm going to reach out and try to influence you not to do this also. Now, an example like cocaine, an example like methamphetamine, it may seem simple and straightforward. What about mind-altering drugs that are given over to people with a prescription, where it becomes fashionable for a time to accept quaaludes as a legitimate form of medicine, and contemporaneously, quaaludes are being used as a party drug, right? It becomes socially acceptable to regard benzodiazepines as a legitimate form of prescription medicine. And coincidentally, contemporaneously, people are using benzodiazepines as a party drug. Okay. Testosterone right now, it is being used as a prescription medication for a wide variety of health problems for both men and women. And people want to regard it as a legitimate prescription drug. It's also being used as a recreational drug, right? Most obviously, it's being used by professional athletes. Now, already in challenging you this way, challenging my audience by approaching this way, you will notice that I'm presenting this issue in a manner that's strangely unfamiliar to Christian-dominated conservative discourse. The vast majority of conservatives who are opposed to the transgender agenda, shall we say, transgenderism as a political movement, they oppose it on the same grounds that they oppose sodomy. They say the Bible is against it, therefore they're against it. And they never stop to reflect on how absurd this justification would seem to them if they looked at any other religion's objection to any new innovation in society. We do have written sources that preserve for history Hindus who were morally opposed to people riding bicycles. And if you can't imagine, there was a time when the bicycle was a really important technology in India. Gasoline was scarce. Building infrastructure like trains was incredibly expensive. There was a time when the bicycle was really quite an important technology in India. And of course, it arrived through European influence as a foreign innovation. And the bicycle arrived with leather seats. So a long time ago, many of you have never seen a bicycle with a leather seat. Well, there was a time when bicycles were made with leather seats. And there was a whole chorus of conservative Hindu opinion opposed to the bicycle entering into their society. And they even preached that this was a kind of European plot to subvert Hindu morality, to corrupt their morals. And what a terrible thing it was to put your bum down on the skin of a cow. So interesting perspective. Nobody living within this Christian conservative worldview seems to be able to have the detachment to say, oh, look, there are other traditions and other religions around the world, and their moral demands and standards seem absurd to me. And their opposition to historical and technological change at each step seems absurd to me because I'm not inside their belief system. How absurd do I seem from the perspective of any detached outsider, whether that's a Hindu examining Christianity, right, or just an atheist, a secular, skeptical, nihilistic person observing Christian society. So when you make a comparison between the use of hormones by transgender people and the use of hormones by bodybuilders, you're already framing the problem. You know, it's very important for people on the left to recognize. And tragically, you're posing the problem in a way that people on the right, conservatives, never will recognize. Now, I just point out there are many reasons why. Have you seen any conservative or right-wing opposition to the use of bodybuilding hormones? There seems to be no interest on the right wing in opposing the use of testosterone by bodybuilders. And if you don't know this, many of the other bodybuilding drugs, their real effect on the bodybuilder is to boost testosterone levels. So the drug itself may not be testosterone, but when you look at the etiology of what the effects are on the body, very often the most important effects is a cascading series of biological effects, chemical effects in the body. But the most important one is that it raises testosterone levels. So you may be looking at a testosterone boosting drug under many different names. Some of these bodybuilders are using 6 different drugs that have different chemical pathways for the same outcome of boosting testosterone and sustaining superhuman testosterone levels in the blood. Why do you suppose it is that conservative Christians are not really shoulder to shoulder, militantly, passionately opposed to this unnatural thing in our society? This use of what's both a mind altering and a body altering drug by athletes. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that something Europe and North America have in common is that sports fans are disproportionately conservative or right wing. There are left-wing sports fans. I mean, being a fan of sports is a mass phenomenon. It's not that it's hard to find a communist who watches football, a communist who watches ice hockey. It's not that that's hard to find, but if you just go to a sports stadium and attend a game in person, if you just walk through the parking lot and look at the bumper stickers that are on the cars and trucks, the political skew of sports fans is very clearly right of center, if not right wing. So why is there no huge chorus of opinion amongst right wingers and conservatives against performance enhancing drugs, which are very often the same drugs we're talking about with transgender people? Okay, there's a problem here. There's a certain sort of moral weakness and intellectual dishonesty on the right. And again, that's why none of those people will listen to my message. They will gather around some Christian preacher who just places his hand on the Bible and claims that Moses was against transgenderism, therefore you should be too. And they don't realize that this is just as absurd as claiming Vishnu is against transgenderism or the Buddha is against transgenderism. It's just laughable. It's laughable from a but they are not laughing. That's their worldview, and to them it's deadly serious. And if history is any guide, they are willing to kill and die for the future of that particular illusion. Now, the allegory of testosterone being used by bodybuilders. It's informative, but of course it's imperfect. Tell me, where now is the conservative and right-wing opposition to Prozac? Where are the people who say there is no Prozac in the Bible? Where are the people who argue on the basis of Christian principles, on the basis of religious conservative principles, or any kind of right-wing principle? Because the right wing is not exhausted by Christianity, but the right wing is certainly preoccupied by Christianity. It's a large percentage of what goes on in the right wing is culturally Christian, if not doctrinally Christian. So in the last 50 years, have we seen a lot of strong Christian opposition to prescription mind-altering drugs, whether we think of benzodiazepines or antidepressants? Now, look, let me say this to you sincerely. If there were a pill that could make you happy, if there were a pill that would actually cure depression, you should be morally opposed to it. And you should be morally opposed to it if you are a Theravada Buddhist, if you are a Japanese Buddhist, if you are a Hindu from India, if you are a traditional conservative Christian. This life is nothing but a vale of tears. How can you possibly endorse or tolerate Satori in a pill, Nirvana in a pill? The right wing, the conservatives, they should be passionately, adamantly opposed to antidepressants. That didn't happen back in the brief sort of honeymoon period with those drugs, the brief period when the general public was very much misled as to how effective they were. And it's not happening now. It's not happening now when these drugs have really been debunked. On the one hand, just how terrible the side effects are has been proven, just how really serious and crippling the negative side effects are. But on the other hand, right, the lack of positive effect, the lack of benefit, the fact, very simply, antidepressants do not cure depression, the sense in which it's a failed paradigm within medicine or within psychiatric treatment. That's now also been proven. Now, I think all of us, even if you are yourself a transgender person, you can sympathize with the fear parents have that their child will run away and get this kind of surgery. Their child will run away and take these mind-altering and body-altering drugs. That being afraid of that is not hard to relate to or is not hard to understand. Where is the equivalent fear that your son will become a bodybuilder and start taking steroids, that your son will become a bodybuilder and take testosterone boosting drugs? It should be exactly the same. Now, again, the conservatives, they do have a fear. The right wing does have a fear of your children becoming a cocaine addict or a heroin addict. Yes, we can't fault them for failing to be afraid of those things. Where is the fear? Where is the fear from the right wing about being concerned about being afraid of your child getting on Prozac, your child getting on any of these antidepressants, or indeed benzodiazepines, any of these prescription mood-altering, mind-altering drugs? Okay, so again, the left-wing worldview is certainly incoherent in 2023. There is an argument that the right-wing worldview is even more incoherent. It's even more sort of internally divided against itself. They stand on a kind of moral ground that's even more shifting. Now, if you were to frame the trans rights movement not in terms of gay rights, but in terms of being a form of feminism, it also highlights certain contradictions that the left is currently painting over, or is currently wanting to ignore. In first wave feminism, this is long before my time, long before I was born, first wave feminism, one of the schools of thought, which today seems very strange to young feminists reading with the history of the movement, one of the schools of thought that was important and influential, but it wasn't the only school of thought, was that women themselves needed to step up. Women needed to imitate men's education. They needed to start studying the same things men studied. And just mention very briefly, the building I went to for one of my schools was actually junior high. It was an old building, and they still had the facilities for separate women's education. I think today they will have renovated and torn it out. But this was like reflecting the world of the 1940s, where they had separate classes where like women studied how to baste a turkey. They taught so-called home economics, where they were teaching women to be housewives. So like men would take a course in Latin, men would take a course in math, and women would choose not to take that course. They would take a different course, separate education in that sense. You're in the same building, but there's a separate classroom where women would go and study knitting and cooking and how to budget, how to do the household budget, how much money you're spending on food, and how to raise children. Really, there were separate classes taught to teenagers from men and women. Now, at that time, to my knowledge, it wasn't compulsory. As a woman, you could take other classes, but then you can imagine. Probably the teachers would say openly to a girl, look, why do you want to study math or something? Or why do you want to study a course that's going to prepare people to become a lawyer? You're never going to do that. Why don't you prepare to become a housewife? Because that's kind of bad. And by the way, one of the answers, so at that time, I'm speaking as a Canadian here, one of the very few career paths that was open to women was being a school teacher. So of the women who would have taken the math classes and some of the other classes like that, a lot of them would have said that they were in preparation to be a school teacher themselves. And that'd be an accepted answer. So I'm just saying, this is part of why education wasn't completely gender segregated, but there was a time when women were being prepared for very different jobs, very different role in life. So one of the schools of first wave feminist thought, and today it seems embarrassing and strange, was really preaching that women should try to put on a pair of trousers. They should try to dress like men and talk like men and study like men, and to prepare for a role in the workforce, much more like men. And literally, I can remember one feminist writer talking about the importance of smoking cigarettes like a man. I mean, talk about an out of date. But, the idea of a woman at a train station standing and smoking cigarettes and talking with the men as equals, where that was itself liberating and important, that women should step up and take on this responsibility as well. Okay, well, today, this remains controversial, as a matter of fact, the extent to which women should try to focus on those things they can excel at, and to what extent women should sort of work against their own disadvantages to develop excellence in areas where they may be at a physical disadvantage compared to men, or they may be at some other disadvantage compared to men. I think that still is a genuine question people have to struggle with in their own lives personally and politically. And I don't think there's one answer that's going to work for everyone. But the real right-wing conservatives, they have to face up to the fact that being a housewife is not going to work for everyone. What a ludicrous model of society. A very good question for you to ask yourself is, ideally, what percentage of women would become housewives with no other education, no other career? From my perspective, I think it's below 10%. I think there are some women for whom that might be the way to go, but I don't know if it's 5%. You know what I mean? I would never want to imagine. I don't want to live in a society like Afghanistan, where the vast majority of women can do absolutely nothing other than raise children and do the cleaning and so on as housewives. Okay, I'm setting aside my own bias here. It remains a contentious issue. Okay, let's say you know a particular young woman face to face. So let's say this girl is 16. And you meet her. Let's say this is a cousin of yours. So you don't know her as well as you know your sister, but you have a female cousin who's 16, and you've known her since she was a small child. You have some sense of her character, and you talk to her 3 or 4 times a year. And you meet her one day, and you see a great change in her appearance at age 16. And you remember her being a very feminine girl who was fascinated by the sort of silly games and dress up and makeup that not all girls her age, but that some girls her age were into. And let's say the last time you talked to her, she was insisting to you that she was going to become a woman's skating champion, like Olympic ice skating. And she was telling you that she loves the frilly dresses and she loves the music and she loves the idea of being this beautiful woman on ice skates. And let's say the last time you talked to her, we were trying to talk her out of that and be like, look, I know a small percentage of those women are on TV, but it's really a pretty grim sport to get involved in. Like, you sure you want to do figure skating? You sure you want to do ice skating? Let's say you had that conversation. And now the next time you meet her, there's a great change in her appearance. She's wearing a pair of trousers. She's smoking a cigarette. She's presenting herself in a much more masculine way. And she tells you in the course of conversation that she has really decided that the things that fascinated her between the ages of 13 and 15 were all bullshit, and that it's a man's world, and that she actually wants to go into mechanical engineering, and that she's changed her courses at school, and she's now at 16 taking classes that prepare you for the engineering path. At my school, that was a separate stream, may not be in your school, where you actually took different courses to prepare you to go into engineering and that kind of mechanical career path. Okay, she switched her track. She stopped doing liberal arts courses. She started doing mechanical engineering courses. And she says, you know what? I've decided that that stuff's all bullshit. And this is the kind of life I want to live. And now I'm in these classes. And you know what? There are only 5 girls in the class. There are 5 girls and 40 guys. And it's really a shame more women don't have it figured out the way I do, that this is really the way to go. She's envisioned a different path in life. Okay. Hypothetically, let's say you talk this through with her. You say, oh, okay, well, mechanical engineering, there are advantages and disadvantages to getting on that path in life. And you talk that through. Certainly a big contrast to wanting to be a singer, wanting to be a dancer, wanting to be an ice skater, wanting to be involved in fashion, or all kinds of things that might have fascinated her when she was younger. When she was younger, she might have been fascinated by horse riding, and now she realizes that's bullshit. As a younger girl, there might have been other things that interest her. Fundamentally, you can say to someone like that at age 16, well, give it a try for 1 year and see if you like it. If you really put your heart and soul and all your energy and effort into doing mechanical engineering for 1 year, you might decide this is great. This is what you want to do with yourself. And you might decide, you know what? This would be good for some other woman, but this really doesn't work for me. For me personally, this is a bad fit. This is a bad match. The type of work isn't what I was expecting. What we're studying in class isn't interesting or rewarding in the way I thought it was going to be. For whatever combination of reasons, you can try to get on that career path. You can try to play that role, which involves sort of strange aspects of gender. It'll probably also involve you being the center of attention because there are only 5 females in the classroom and there are 40 males. There'll be a lot of strange aspects to that experience, but you can try it for 1 year and you can change your mind. You can change your mind and decide that really you want to go into poetry, really you want to be a filmmaker, really you want to go into fashion. I don't know. You can try this for 1 year and change your mind. Now, I'm not going to say there's no harm at all, switching your major either in high school or in university. There is risk involved. There could be long-term consequences in terms of how many courses you have to take, or you end up doing an extra year in high school to get the course you need to get the major you want in university. There can be elements of risk. Let's say you talk to this same female cousin of yours when she's graduating from high school, and she's looking even tougher and even more butch and self-confident now, and she's been working out at the gym a lot. She looks more muscular. And she says to you, what I realize now is that even that engineering is bullshit. What she wants to do is be a female law enforcement officer. She wants to be a lady cop. That's now what she's into. And she says she's not even going to college. She thinks mechanical engineering is bullshit. She's going to go to the police force and sign up and start working as a cop. Now, again, there is some risk. This is going to change who you are for the rest of your life, right? Even if you're a cop for 6 months, it'll change you for the rest of your life. So way in which this is going to change the person you are, and it's going to change a lot of things for you, right? It change your perspective on the world in a lot of ways. You are in a position to say, so before she was 16, now she's 17. You are in a position to say to your 17-year-old cousin, why don't you try it for 1 year? Why don't you try being a police officer for 1 year? And maybe you'll love it. Maybe this is going to be great, but maybe it won't work out, right? Maybe you'll change your mind. Okay, here's the thing. Feminism, and this particular school of thought about feminism, first wave feminists saying that women really need to step up and put on a pair of trousers, and women need to emulate men in education and their role in the workforce. Okay, you can try it and see if it works for you personally without irrevocable harm. And that is not true of cocaine. That is not true of heroin. That is not true of antidepressants like Prozac. And that is not true of surgery that will cut off your breasts, surgery that will cut off your testicles, mind-altering, body-altering hormonal drugs. They cannot be thought of in the same category as gay rights. They cannot be thought of in the same category as the progress of feminism or women's rights. I hate to tell you this, guys. If there were any women who don't want the right to vote, they can just choose not to vote in the next election, right? Voting or not voting will not do irrevocable harm to you. It doesn't change you as an individual, right? The progress of gay rights, giving gay people fundamentally equal liberties and freedoms, right? It is in no way comparable to psychiatric drugs. It is in no way comparable to a permanent, irrevocable, life-altering surgery. And when we conceptualize this problem in those categories, it's very clear why even left-wing atheists must oppose the current 21st century transgender agenda.